So we just want you to tell us who you are and when you were born and where you were born.
Flem Arrowood. I was born July the 26th, 1938, at a little place called Fleming, West Virginia. It didn't have a post office.
So were you born in a hospital?
No, I was born at home, and we have the library table in the kitchen that I was born on. I refinished it a few years ago, and it's a conversation piece for us. As the doctor came to the house, and I've got a twin brother. We were naturally born at the same time. I was born first, so I'm a little older than him.
So tell us about your childhood home.
Well, it was a large two-story house. It was a farmhouse. Dad had bought it from a prairie gentleman that lived in the area, and it had probably 80 or 90 acres, but most of it was hillside, and it was on 12-Pole Creek, and we had a real happy growing up. Had a large family. There was 8 of us, 8 children, and we were the youngest. And we played in the creek and in the hills, and that was before TVs, or we didn't even have a radio. And when we first moved there wasn't any electricity. Daddy had purchased some batteries that they used, but later on they had electricity and no gas, but they used coal and also wood burning stove in the kitchen that they cooked on, and so and had a lot of company. The Bethel Church was across the creek from where we lived, and especially on their meeting time, which was on the third of each month, there would be 40 or 50 people come home for dinner after church, and the children always had to wait last to eat. The men ate first, and then the women, and then the children. So sometimes we'd slip in and get a biscuit or something. Anyway, we went to a one-room school, and the name of it was Hurricane Branch, but we called it Harkin Branch, and we didn't know any better till quite a few years. When we moved down to Wayne, we were the country bumpkins when we moved down there. Glenn and I were probably 12 years old when we moved, and anyway, we had a lot of good experiences. And during the school, a lot of times the kids would go out and play in the hills and in the creek. Well, I don't know what the teacher was doing, and we had a different teacher about every year. All the kids were in the same room, and it was a good experience. It'd be good for all children to have an experience like that, whether they liked it or not. Anyway, we were blessed. Our mom and dad were Christians, and they brought us up in the right manner and take us to church, and so we were really blessed.
What's your earliest memory?
Well, probably my dad taking his big hand under my chin and combing my hair. That was probably my earliest memory, and always admired him and respected him.
So tell me about Mama and Papa. What were they like?
They were very reserved. They didn't talk a lot to their children, but that was a long time ago, and they more or less they didn't have a lot of advice, but you know, we realized what kind of people they were, and how blessed that we were to have them. Dad was a merchant. He had worked in the grocery business, and he worked in the coal fields in their company stores, and also he worked for Kroger quite a bit. And then they bought a store in Wayne, West Virginia, and him and our Uncle Flem. And later on, it burned down, and later on, I guess they built it back or had it back, and then they decided to build a building, and Dad went to the banker there in Wayne and told him he'd like to borrow money to build this building, and it was about a block from where the bank was, but there wasn't any other buildings out there, so that banker said, "Glenn, are you sure you're not getting too far out of town?" So they built ABC Food Market there in Wayne, and kept it for quite a few years. Then later on, he sold it out, and they built a building beside of it and put in furniture and appliances. And that was before the TVs came out.
Did Mama work?
No, yes, she did a lot of work, but it was at home. She never did work on an outside job. She had eight children to raise, and back then, a lot of times the older children raised the younger ones. So
What's your favorite memory of Mama?
It's a good question. We realized that how much that she loved us, and as far as one time, I wouldn't know how to answer that. She was a special person.
Tell me about your siblings.
Well, I guess Scott's the oldest.
Your brothers and sisters. Your
Oh,
siblings.
my brothers and
Yeah,
sisters.
yeah.
Oh. Well, I guess Eula was the oldest, and then Sherman. They're both deceased, and then Avenel. Well, it was Eula, Betty, Avenel, and Margaret. The girls were the oldest, and then Sherman, Jack, and Glenn, or myself, and then Glenn was the order they came in. We all got along well. We didn't have hardly any problems among the family. Very few fights.
Tell us about your grandparents. Do you remember?
I don't remember my grandfather Arrowood. He died when he was 55, and he was. They lived in eastern Kentucky, in the Paintsville, Kentucky area, and he died of pneumonia. He was a elder in the United Baptist Church, and he knew a lot of people, especially back in that area. That church that we attended there, and that's where I belong now. At that time, there was close to 1,000 members of that church, and he was on the Johnson County Board of Education when he died. But our grandmother, she lived quite a bit longer, and she stayed with Mother and Daddy even when we were still at home some. She was a Daniels. That was her maiden name, and they were all good people. And on Mother's side, she was a Walters, and they lived in the same area. I actually lived on what they called the little road that went by her house. It was called Buttermilk, and the main road. I'm trying to find a name for it. I can't bring it up right now.
Was it Butcher Holler?
No, it wasn't Butcher Holler. The little community they lived in there was called Boone's Camp, Kentucky, and the name of that little stream through there was, and that road was Greasy Creek, and Daddy always told a story about. He'd tell a lot of people, said, I married a little greasy girl raised on buttermilk. So that was a saying they had through the years. And Papa Walters had a little store there where they lived, and I remember going there when we were just little. He'd take us out and find us some candy, and there was a church just up the road there. Well, we still go to it sometimes. It's called Little Friendship, and Dad was raised on that creek. He was born on that creek actually. It only was up the road probably a couple of miles, and I guess that old house is still there. But there was a small schoolhouse that they went to school, and then back then they would have church on Sundays, and then use the building for school on the weekdays. So it was a little different time that they were raised in. He can remember the first car that come through the country, and a lot of things he can remember in his lifetime. The first plane, and they rode in the plane, and they witnessed the going to the moon, and they witnessed quite a few things in their lifetime. So.
Did your friends ever get you in trouble when you were younger?
Well, I've got a few of them in trouble, I guess. Sorry to say. We have a first cousin that lives in up around Cleveland right now, Roger Dutton. We see him quite often. He tells everybody that we taught him how to smoke, and then when we got older and we'd already quit and he was still smoking, and we tried to teach him how to quit, but we never could. He finally quit on himself, and anyway, we weren't perfect. We were just young boys growing up in the country, and like I said, Mom and Dad didn't, at that time, in the way children were raised, they were more or less just turned loose and learned on their own. So we don't tell a lot of things.
But surely you got one more.
One more what?
One more story.
Well, probably.
Where you got somebody. Surely you had some sort of shenanigans that you got into.
We played sports. I played football and basketball at Wayne High School. We played back when the helmets didn't have any protection on them, didn't have any guards on them. So that was a different experience. One of the guys on the team had a leather helmet that he wore, and about every other game he'd get knocked out. And so it was a time when you didn't do a lot of practice. You just come in, went out and played, and didn't do a very good job at it. So, but it was a lot of fun.
What were some of the chores that you had, and did you get an allowance?
No, we didn't get allowance. We didn't have any use for an allowance. we had chores like, you know, on the farm, but we were the youngest ones, and we didn't have to do a lot of work. For some reason, the older kids thought we were spoiled, being the twins and the last ones. And anyway, we did get a lot of things that they didn't get. Remember, bicycles we got, and the little scooters. Anyway, one thing we did do, I was talking about going to school. We played Anthony over and Rover, come on over, and the little schoolhouse we went to. At that time, we thought it was a big area, but we went back later after the building was gone, and we didn't realize that the area was so small. We couldn't figure out how the schoolhouse was built on such a small area, and we would go. I was talking about going outside and playing. We'd go up in the hills and build mud and leaf houses, and one time I do remember there was some of the kids that they would tell the teacher that they need to be off a day or two to help in the garden or on the farm, and so we decided we'd try that. So one day we told the teacher we needed to go home and help work in the garden or on the farm, and there was 3 or 4 of us got together, and so we went down the road from school and got up on the hill around the rock cliffs, and as they went out of the holler, we hollered at the teacher. So the next day we went into school, and she wanted to know how we got along with working in the garden. So she figured out what was going on. And we played in the creek quite a bit, in Trailpole Creek. And when we were probably less than 2 years old, we went out, my twin brother and myself went over to the creek, and we took a little orange crate or apple crate with us and took it out into the water. And so there's a road that goes by over top of the creek, and one of the neighbors come by and saw us, and he started blowing his horn, and somebody come out and got us out of the water. So.
2? How old were you?
Probably around 2 years old, 2 or 3. We weren't very old. So I guess we come, and another time we were playing with one of our cousins and our brother Jack, and we had an inner tube we used a lot of times when we were in the water. So they wouldn't give us the inner tube, and we just about drowned. So just what boys do when they're growing up.
So tell me about your first job, some of your first jobs, and how much you made.
Well, first job, me and Glenn, see, what did we did? Trying to think of what we did to make some money. Anyway, we had made some money, and we bought our mother, it's actually in there on the shelf, a tea set. But as far as an actual job, it was probably, I'm trying to think, what was my first job? In a grocery store, I guess, for my Aunt Alkie in Huntington. That was after I got married. So we actually didn't work much till after we got married. And then we moved to Dayton, Ohio, and worked for a few months. We loaded up a couple of pickup trucks, and I guess Daddy gave us furniture and whatever we needed, and take it up there. And we both got homesick and came back home. And I worked for Uncle Lee a little while in his store, a few weeks. And I worked for Davis Wholesale Company in Huntington. That's when Scott was born, when I was working there. And trying to think, well, the first job that I worked at, I went to Cleveland. I was 17, and we altered our birth certificate so I could go to work at General Motors up there. And I was hanging doors on a conveyor, went around hanging the car doors, and that didn't last long either.
So you were talking about hanging doors.
Oh yeah, that was a General Motors plant in Cleveland, and I didn't last too long there either. So I always had a place to go back to. I was 17 at that time, and then after Sandra and I married, we went to Dayton, worked a while, and came back to Huntington. Worked for Sister, my Aunt Alkie there on 14th Street West, and then I worked for another company, I can't remember their name. Then I was working for Davis Wholesale when Scott was born, and he was born in March and 5th in '59, and that was the same day that I was converted. And that's always been a special time, and there's what, 3 or 4 of the other members of the family were born on March the 5th. So anyhow, and as far as jobs, after that, let's see, I started to work at a gas company in Wayne, West Virginia. Worked there for a couple of years probably, and then started building cabinets, and built an old building that I worked in a while, part-time, while I was still working at the gas company. And then I decided to build a cabinet shop, and we built it, and Sandy's brother had come in from the service, and so he started working with me, and we kept it open quite a few years, and we built a house up on the hill was up from where Mom and Dad lived. It was across the road from where the cabinet shop was. We lived there, I don't know how many years. It was, I guess Dana was born while we lived there also, and I guess she was born later after we'd moved. We sold that. We sold we quit building cabinets and doing work there, and sold everything out and moved down to Wayne. Rented a couple of houses there while we was building a new house on Crag Road, and we've probably lived in, I know, over 30 different houses that we've lived in and bought and built. And so I've done construction work most of the time after that, well, practically all the time after that, and worked in, we moved to Phoenix in '73 and stayed about 13 months, I guess, and came back, and we bought some land in Wayne and subdivided it and put in a subdivision, and then I worked out at the carpenter's local for years and retired from them. I went to Dayton again, and for 5 years, and worked up there for Lazarus in their carpenter shop, and then we bought a place up there and remodeled it. So and we moved. Like I said, we were in Arizona. I worked some in Kentucky and Tennessee. So I've been a carpenter and builder for most of my life, and we always enjoyed working and you know, see what you build and take pride in it. So
tell us how you came to the Lord.
well, that's an easy question. Like I said, being raised up and around Christian people all my life, and a little story that I tell quite often. At one room school I was attending, we had a teacher that was seeking the Lord, and I was probably, I'm not sure how old. I wasn't very old, but I remember her going outside during the school, and I could hear her out there praying to the Lord. And I thought, when I get ready to be a child of God, I won't have to mourn like she is, because my dad's a preacher. And I was living in Huntington. Sandy and I were living down there, and we went by to visit our Aunt Emma, lived down on the other end of town, and she said they're having a revival up at the little colored schoolhouse, and your mom and dad would be awful well pleased if you'd go up there. So I decided to go up and please my mom and dad. When I got up there, it was just like the Lord just set me out in the valley of decision. And I said, Lord, I'd rather have salvation than to have anything. And then it was just like he gave me power to become one of his little children. And I prayed for about 2.5 weeks. Did everything I could to save myself, and finally the Lord made it easy for me. He just said, Lord, just glorify my name, and he told me that 2 times, and for some reason I hesitated, and in my life I could see the Lord moving away from me. And I remember reaching out with my hands trying to get a hold of him, and then the next thing I knew, there's a space of time that I don't account for. It just feel like my spirit was going upwards. And when I come to myself, I was standing on the stand. We were in the Westwood Church down at Ashland, Kentucky. And I was standing there on the stands with my arms raised, saying, "Thank you, Lord." And that was the most beautiful people that I'd ever seen. Everybody looked like angels. And the next morning, when I woke up, everything looked different. And I tell the people, I believe I was looking at the earth of the world as it was in the beginning, when God made that beautiful place back there in the, I'm missing the name, the garden, that beautiful garden back there in the beginning. That's what I witnessed, and that's what I'm expecting to see someday. So God's real and heaven's real, so that's my little experience.
Paul asks, what is a year in your life that you'd consider your prime? maybe the best year of your life?
That's hard to. The best time in my life was when I was converted, but also when the children were born. So that would be great. And when I met Sandy, I'll have to be sure and put that in there. And don't I get to tell you about when I first met her?
I think that'd be great. Tell us about that.
She's not listening, is she?
No, she's not here.
Okay. Well, back in those times, the children had birthday parties, and you would travel all over the country. When you found out there was a birthday party, you would boys would jump in the car and head for the birthday party. So for some reason we ended up at East Lynn on Little Lynn Creek. Me and I think William Allen Dutton Rogers was our first cousin. Anyway, that's where I met her at a birthday party, and it was a special time. The saying goes, I guess the sparks flew, and we didn't know who she was or where she lived or anything. So it was the next few days anyway. We made a trip up to East Lynn Grade School, where she was still in grade school. But anyway, that's where we started, and we were quite young at that time. And back in those days, the kids courted, or even in high school, there'd be quite a few of those children that would marry while they were in high school.
Call from Glenn.
We'll just take a pause.
Glenn.
Are they gone?
Call from
Yeah. No, I think it's
Somebody got it.
So what was next? So after you saw her at the party,
Oh, I finally found her at school, and so we courted a couple of years really before we got married. She was 16, I was 18 when we got married, and it must have been a reason, because you can see the picture on the wall over there. Was a big reason we got married. The Lord blessed us for sure, and you wouldn't be here if it wouldn't have been for that. So.
what did Mom and Papa think about Mom?
They didn't, as far as I know, they didn't have any problem. So they didn't discourage me. They just, like I say, that was a different time.
So Connie asks, what other professions did you consider? We've already talked about where you work, but I guess why did you end up doing carpentry work?
Well, I always enjoyed working with my hands and doing something that you can see what you accomplished when you did it. But I learned on my own, along with electrical and plumbing also. We did some concrete work, but I did a lot of commercial, industrial work when I worked in the Carpenters Local.
Bethany wants to know, how many houses have you built, and which one was your favorite?
She'll be wanting me to say hers. I don't really know how many I built. It's be quite a few, and we did a lot of remodeling work also. As far as a favorite one that we lived in was probably the one in Huntington that I built, the great big gray house I built there in East Pea Ridge. That's probably the favorite one. And then the one I built in Johnson City, we lived in it too. And we also helped build her house, so that's a nice place they've got there.
Brooklyn wants to know, what was your favorite pet?
We had a dog when we were young. We lived up there at Fleming, and we played. I don't even remember what its name was, but Glenn and I played. It was with us all the time, and that would probably be the favorite one that we had. And we had Brandy when we lived there at Wayne. You probably remember him. He was a good dog.
Callie wants to know, what did boys wear to school when you were little?
Just whatever their parents put on them. Just regular country clothes. A lot of our mom made a lot of her shirts out of coffee sacks. Back at that time, out of meal and flour that comes in. It came in a bag that was they put that type of material on them so that people can use them to make their own clothing.
Lily and Kirsten want to know, which of your children was the funniest?
Which of my children were the funniest? I guess all three of them. Scott and Dana were quieter than Tim was. Maybe Tim's probably the funniest.
Which one of your sons is the better looking?
I can't answer that one.
Ben wants to know, what was your first car?
First car. I'm pretty sure it was a Ford, but I'm not sure what year it was. I do remember one time we had our own car that we drove to school, and we went out one morning to go to school, and it was gone. And so somebody had come along through the night and stole it, and they drove it over into Ohio and stripped it. And so later on, we got another one.
So, doesn't say who. What was your first thought of Mama when you saw her?
I thought she was special.
Rebecca wants to. I'm going to wait for this one for later when you two are together. What event did you witness that had the greatest impact on society? Thad, of course, asked this question. What event did you witness that had the greatest impact on society?
I guess probably that's a little hard to consider, seeing what I've come through. It's a hard question, really. One of the things that just probably disturbed me more than anything was the riots that we saw back through the years. You know, the unruly and watching humanity do things that we couldn't understand, how they could possibly do such terrible things. That's about all I could answer, I guess.
Elise wants to know, how many girls did you date before Mama?
She's trying to get me in trouble. I don't know. I didn't date very many. Maybe 3 or 4.
What do you see as your life's greatest accomplishment?
My family. My family.
So, 10 years from now, and somebody, one of your kids or great grandkids or great great grandkids or great 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 grandkids get to watch this, what are you going to tell them? What do you want to tell them?
The greatest choice that you'll ever make in your life is when the good Lord visits, is to choose salvation and choose the good part that Jesus said Mary chose. It can't be taken away. Honor your mother and father, and above all, be good to each other and look after each other. Family is very important. That's probably it.